On behalf of the Judge family, we want to thank you all for being here with us today to remember and honor the life of Brock Judge. I'm Brock's brother-in-law, Randy King, married to his sister, Vanessa. Dan just sat next to me here and just mentioned that he can't believe how many dear friends and family have come to support the family and to honor Brock. So we sincerely thank you. We'd like to thank Denise Duncan for providing our organ music today, and Cammie Hall, Brock's sister, will be our chorister. We're going to have an opening song, hymn number 300, which you can find in the hymn books. Families can be together forever, and then we'll have an opening prayer by Brock's sister, Abby Judge.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're so grateful to be gathered here today and so grateful for everyone who has come from near and far to celebrate the life of my brother Brock. And we're so grateful to know that he is with his sister and his mom and all of our loved ones that have gone before us. And we pray that we all feel peace at this time. And we're so grateful to know that we'll be with our family again someday. We love thee, and we offer this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
First, we're going to hear some words from Brock's friend Patrick. After hearing from Patrick, Brock's friend and previous coworker Clint Finch will speak, and then we'll have a musical number, I Am a Child of God, sung by Brock's nieces and nephews, followed by memories by some of Brock's siblings, Kurt Ecker, Jennifer Gulch, Jessica Hill, Sarah Judge, and Becky Benson.
Um, First off, I would like to thank everyone for coming today. I know everyone here meant a tremendous amount to Brock, and I know he loves each and every one of you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Patrick. I met Brock about a year and a half ago through one of my best friends whose name is also Brock and has a striking amount of things in common with Brock. I went there with him to learn a little bit about cryptocurrency. And the first time I was there, I was greeted by Brock and his dog Chloe, who looked pretty vicious on the outside. And if you've ever been there, I'm sure you know how easily a 1-hour lesson turns into 6 hours of the most interesting conversation you'll ever hear. From that point on, I knew I wanted to be a part of whatever he was doing. Since that time, he's picked up a number of new things like mining cryptocurrency, learning to play guitar, podcasting, photography, building bikes, and believe it or not, cooking. He was a highly underrated chef. The point here is that he was always eager to learn and grow in his knowledge. And one of the first lessons he taught myself and others around him was to go after your interests and do it to the fullest of your abilities, no matter how daunting or difficult the journey looked. For him, the fun was always in the process, and he loved overcoming any obstacle he was faced with. He could do anything and proved it many times. The only thing I knew he could never do was grow a beard. Going into Brock's house now as things have changed is intimidating if you're seeing it for the first time, I must admit. But behind all the black walls, obnoxiously loud heavy metal music and machinery, I came to know a man like no other. His kind heart, good intentions, and care for those around him was truly unmatched. Brock was always the first to offer help to anyone. Whether it was advice, knowledge, repairing things, or food and water for the homeless, he was always there to help others any way he could. If there was one person in the world that saw the good in all people, there's no doubt in my mind that it was Brock. It didn't matter who you were or what your circumstances were. He attracted all walks of life and invited them to learn and grow with him. He always preached his slogan, "Community is immunity." It was through his kind heart and care for humanity that he formed such a strong community of people around him that truly cared for one another like family. He was the best example of what he preached, and also instilled in the people around him the importance of a community where everyone was treated with kindness, respect, and good intent. A great example of that was the way he took me in and treated me. Brock always asked how I was, if anything was on my mind, and if something was, he always knew. If I needed someone to talk to, it's hard for me to open up to people, but the more I got to know Brock, I realized he never judged me or looked at me differently, no matter what. He was an open book and always loved helping me with whatever problems I had. He truly wanted the best for me and supported me in everything I put my mind to. He quickly became one of my good friends and a person I knew I could go to with anything. His genuine interest, support, and care showed me the type of person he was, and I'm truly grateful that he was my mentor and my friend. He changed my life for the better like many others around him, and I'll forever be grateful for him. The things he taught me, the people he brought me, and the lessons I learned from him. Nothing could ever replace him, and the impact he left on so many people's lives was remarkable. What I just described about how he treated me was true across the board for everyone Brock met. He created a safe space for everyone to be who they were. And lastly, to his family. In the time that I've known him, there wasn't a day that went by where he didn't admire something about someone in the family or tell me a story about what made your family so great and interesting. The first few months I was there, he had pictures of his desk, of his childhood, and you guys, and showed me different pictures every single day for about 4 months. The more I got to know him, the more I learned about you guys, and the more I got to see how much he cared about you guys and what made him the man he was. Brock was a great man with values, extremely hard to find in most people, and I can see he got it from the family as a whole. I just wanted you guys to know his love for you was immense and always showed every day. again, thank you everyone for being here today. I know everyone here has a very special place in Brock's heart, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys, so thank you.
I've known of Patrick. We've corresponded through email, but it's the first time I've actually been able to actually meet him. And Patrick, Brock thought the world of you. And your comments were spot on. I don't think anything I say is going to be contrary or different or better put than what Patrick said. I'm going to just try to keep it together. I don't know if I physically can generate more tears, but we'll see. If you don't know who I am, my name is Tomato Face. And if my face is red, it's because I've been out in the sun. And a lot of us have nicknames. One of my favorites is Goob over there. I wrote quite a few things down. Might be done quickly or I might ramble on. I'm not sure. But my head has just been swirling with 20 years of memories and things that have happened and the impact that I felt from Brock. I graduated high school, Blue Ridge, up in Pine Top Lakeside in 2002. Shortly after that, I ventured down to the valley. No real plans other than just have a change of scenery. No job lined up, no place to live, nothing really on my to-do list. And I was just kind of crashing on my sister's couch. What little money I did have and I saved up very quickly got spent on the bare essentials, an Xbox and some new clothes. And then one Sunday, just trying to bum a meal, I went over to my uncle's house, Scott McCabe. And I let him know that I had been looking for work and hadn't been able to really find anything. And some of my comments have been censored a little bit since we are at church. But my Uncle Scott, or Hogbutt, as he's been referred to, or knew Dan from working at SRP together. And as Dan would recount, I think he always mentioned Cammy answering the phone. He would call the house and say, he'd either say, "Is my butt's the blackest there?" or "This is my butt's the black." I don't know. But anyways, he gave me Dan's number so I could call him about a job, so I could start earning some money. Now, my Uncle Scott, he held Brock in very high esteem as well. It's just like everyone. A few years prior to me moving down here, my dad and I were down in the valley with my Uncle Scott, and we made a trip over to Home Depot. Brock happened to be working that day, and that's the first time I ever met Brock. It was just a brief interaction, a brief introduction, and him and my Uncle Scott talked for a little while. Afterwards, as we're walking back to our vehicle, my Uncle Scott said what a solid young man that was. So, going back to where I was, I called Dan, a call that would significantly affect the rest of my life. So much so that if he told me at the time, I would have doubted that. Especially since the very first time I met Dan in person, we're at the first job I ever did for judge netting. It's in the Way West Valley. Brock and I had been working the job all week. We drilled the holes, set the poles. I think Dan was bringing the net. He pulls up in the classic white Chevy Astro van that everybody has hot rodded around all over at one point or another. And he's in the back. He's fumbling with something, going a million miles per hour as usual. And so I go to introduce myself, and I outstretched hand. He barely turns away from what he's doing, looks over, and he says, "Oh, hey, Spaz," and then goes right back goes right back to what he's doing. To be fair, I was a spaz. I'm sure I had on some red Dickie shorts and a tie-dye shirt. I was growing out some scraggly, dingy, long time ago dyed black hair, and I was in the thick of a mustache growing contest with some of my friends. I remember thinking that the job, it was nice while it lasted, but the owner of the company's not too impressed, so better start looking for other work. I didn't hear from anybody once that job was done from Judge Netting for probably a week or more, until I got some random call one afternoon saying, hey, someone's picking you up in an hour or two and you're going to Oakland. I remember Brock telling me it took some convincing, but told Dan, despite me looking and being a spaz, I was a decent hand. So they were able to put me to work. From the first job that I worked with Brock, from that first car ride that morning out to the West Valley, I knew Brock and I were going to be involved in each other's lives from there on. We discussed a shared love for a more obscure musical variety taste. We went on to see many of our favorite bands together, a lot of different shows, from seeing Cursive 3 consecutive nights when we were in LA to Modest Mouse in San Francisco. I'm pretty sure that one of those nights in LA at the Cursive concert, the Chevy Astro van got towed because we parked it in a CVS parking lot trying to get to the show on time. Spending so much time with Brock and others at Judge Netting also changed my vocabulary. A lot of you have probably heard these sayings, and I use them on a regular basis. My children can attest to that. How you coming? I ask people all the time, how you coming? What's the snag? What is a snag on this? What's the snag on that? Don't tell me what I don't want to hear because you'll get wrong answer. Or don't say, what did you say? Because you're going to get, you heard me. Another favorite is the bonus lane. If you don't know what the bonus lane is, maybe someday you will. It's awesome. I'm not going to fully go into this because of censorship, but excuses are like, I'm sure you guys know, Dan is just not a big fan of excuses. We had discussions about employment at the Hungry Biscuit on a regular basis, talked about our disdain for butt baby music, and living in beautiful Snowball. And then Brock and I, on a regular basis, incorporated into our conversations phrases and sayings that only meant stuff to us. In fact, the last time I spoke to Brock, last Friday, we talked about employment at the Hungry Biscuit. But we also talked a lot of how everything was unheard of, and I can't pay my guys overtime, and it's bootyful. Frank, we got that one from you. That's a good-looking dog. Dang, you're good. Bobby, and oh, hey, Bew. Like I said, doesn't mean anything to anybody but Brock and I, and we said it on a regular basis. Brock took me to my first and only trip to Hooters in Fort Collins, Colorado when I was 19. We did not use the company card for that meal. One time we were at Chili's in the Bay Area, and Brock and Mark and then Josh Reedhead and I, we sent a round of waters to a neighboring table of girls. And they looked over confused, and we're just like, it's on us, no problem. Another time we went to this cheesecake factory on top of the Macy's building in San Francisco. And we're in this elevator packed full of people. And instead of facing forward towards the doors like every other human being on this earth, Brock turns around in the very front and faces the back. Just grinning at everybody. He did something else I won't mention, but another time we're just walking into a grocery store. The shopping cart is just slowly rolling through the parking lot. There's some people just minding their own business. And unbeknownst to them, that shopping cart was coming in at a cool quarter mile an hour, maybe, Brock dramatically sprints off and then dives and crashes into the parking lot or into the shopping cart, yelling, "No!" And we're like, "Brock, you saved their lives." Another time we were at a little get together. It was over here in Tempe. And without the aid of any intoxicating substances whatsoever, we had an encounter with the police. And they just came to break up the party. And Brock, I don't know why he did this, but he goes on the curb and just starts pretending to cry. Just bawling his eyes out when the cops tried to talk to him. And like I said, we had nothing to hide. We hadn't done anything wrong. I don't know why he was doing that. But I ended up telling the officer that he had lost his kitten and we were just trying to find it. During that first job I referenced where Brock and I were in the West Valley, we had to go get an auger at some random yard somewhere in the valley that had a bunch of stuff stored in it that I would never see again. The auger was drilled into the ground about, it's probably 4 feet or so. It was in there pretty solid. And so I went and shook it there. I was like, all right, well, nothing we can do here. We had no equipment, no tools. And Brock, over the next hour, tried thing after thing after thing to get that auger out. We still didn't get the auger out, but he tried for over an hour to get that auger out. I've looked back on that experience several times throughout my life. And when that experience happened, I remember a light bulb going off in my head. Never take anything at its face value. If you have a challenge, try everything you can to overcome it. And his ideas that he had to get this auger out were innovative. They were out of the box thinking. That set me on course for my propensity to try and think out of the box later on in life and not conform to whatever anybody else is doing and not be afraid. I know it sounds, I don't know, maybe a little exaggerated, but it's not. It was a very profound experience for me. Another time we were at the driveway right by Frank's house. Was it Downey? Is that what it is? Yeah. And we're working on that driveway, driving range. And there was just a slight incline right next to the driving range. And this elderly gentleman pulled up. He got out of his golf cart, and you could see it coming a mile away. He stumbles and falls down. And me, a 19-year-old teenager, I turned my head like I didn't see it, trying to avoid what I considered an awkward situation. Brock immediately sprinted towards that guy to make sure that he was okay. That there was nothing awkward about helping out somebody in need. And again, I know it may seem silly, but that experience changed the way I viewed situations like that. And my wife will tell you, I will spring from my seat, open a door for somebody, grab something that is too heavy for somebody, strangers, it doesn't matter. And it's because of that situation that I witnessed from Brock. And that is not a singular incident. He did stuff like that all the time. He never turned his head to somebody in need. From the first job I worked with Brock, I knew it would be a rare encounter for me to meet someone smarter than Brock or more capable of doing whatever they wanted. I do agree with Patrick on the beard. That's one thing you could never do. As many would attest to you, rarely did you ever just have a casual conversation with Brock. Speaking to Brock was often thoughtful, thought-provoking, insightful, and of course hilarious. From him calling you no better than a used Q-tip to telling you that his ailment of choice, if required, would be Tourette's. When we told our oldest son Wrecker about Uncle Broccoli, as he would call him when he was little, he had passed away, his first question was, what are they going to do with Chloe? Because that's Brock's kid. Recently, Brock had picked Shanley up from the airport, and me and Brock were up front, And my wife is not an animal fan, not a dog fan. So she jumps in back, and Chloe jumps right up on her lap, of course, and just starts passing gas. And Brock and I are just dying. And Brock's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We changed your diet." We know that Chloe meant the world to Brock. I know he spent far more money on her dietary needs than his own and pampered that precious dog. But that's just what Brock did. Or when we'd go out to dinner, Chloe would always get her own meal, specially ordered. When I started to work for Judge Netting, my goal was to get on a mission. Brock was always supportive of that. It helped me work towards accomplishing that. Got a little dicey whenever Swain would show up. And those two and their antics. But the night I got set apart as a missionary, Brock was there. The stake president went around the room, and anyone that wanted to could say something. I'll never forget sitting in that foyer in my house in Sholo. Brock telling me that I was a rock, steadfast and immovable. That meant the world to me. I didn't go on a mission until I was 21. Normally they go when they're 19. For a long time, I really never knew why. But I eventually came to the conclusion that one, it helped intersect my path with my wife, my dear wife, my darling wife. And two, it gave me 2 years that I needed with Brock to learn what he needed to show me. And that I needed to be there for him, and he needed to be there for me. In that same setting, the stake president, he didn't know Brock, had no idea who he was. He stops, looks him dead in the eye, and told Brock, "You can still go on a mission. It's not too late." I always love that. Recently, I remember being overcome with gratitude, like a lifelong desire had been accomplished when Brock told me that two of the people I admire most in this world, him and his dad, were on extremely good terms. And he told me about the Leatherman that he had sent Dan and what that meant. And he always spoke of Janny so tenderly. And that always softened my heart towards my own mother. Last I knew, Brock was working on getting out to Hawaii to spend a little time with family out there. He told me that Dan doesn't know it yet, but I want to help with Judge Netting, and he was genuinely excited about the prospect. I know it will now be Brock's honor to be laid to rest beside Rachel, and to be reunited beyond the veil. On more than one occasion, I told Brock that I was confident that our relationship began before this mortal existence, that he and I stood side by side combating Lucifer in the pre-earth life. And we vowed to one another that we would reunite in the flesh and continue that battle. Brock, you've had such a significant role in shaping who I am and what I stand for. I owe you a mountain of gratitude. When the time comes for me to pass from this life, your grinning grill better be front and center waiting for me. Brock, I love you, brother. And I will never again gaze upon a rising or setting sun, and not at least whisper under my breath, "Hey, Bio." Thank you.
While the nieces and nephews are getting settled, I wanted to let you know why we chose this song today. Brock called me not too long ago, and he said, "Mom, a song just popped into my head, one that I haven't heard for decades. But I remember it, and I remember every word as if I heard it yesterday." This is a song that he learned and heard and sung all of his childhood days, hundreds and hundreds of times, but he hadn't heard for a long time. So we hope that we know that Brock will appreciate this today.
Each
Been a while since I stood at this pulpit. But goodness, 20 years. Good to be here. Maybe not under the best circumstances, but sure been fun to see some familiar faces. Thank you for being here. Just like Clint, we'll see if I can get through this. So, it was the summer of 92. I was living in Utah, and Brock and Sarah and Rachel were living down in Murrieta. And Mom took us on a trip down to see a boyfriend of hers that had some kids, and Brock and I hit it off right away, playing Nintendo and Punch Out, and I think he had Excite Bike on his gaming system too, and had a bunch of fun there. And was a few weeks later, a month later, found out he's gonna be my brother, and how cool is that? 10 years old, and now you get a brother, same age. Brock and I were only 6 weeks apart, and so all going through school, same grade, and all the same stages in life. It was pretty fun. It's always fun to have I'm glad he was the older brother. Be able to look up to him on a lot of things. Instead of, say, favoring Salt Lake or Murrieta, Mom and Dad decided, let's just start somewhere new. So we came here. And what a treat that was. All of you played such an important role in our growing up here. Not too far from here, Brock and I shared a room for a good 10 years. The bunk beds would go on top of each other to the side. We'd continue to switch off. We had a boombox in there back when there were CDs. Last week, my son asked me what's a CD, and I realized I'm getting a little old. But we would listen to music every night going to bed. Very different tastes. I'd have to plow through a Smashing Pumpkins CD with Brock. And I think I had like a Cool Running soundtrack or something. He always had the cool music. But Brock wouldn't be, I don't think he'd be proud of this to say, but he knew every word to Garth Brooks' CD, Rope in the Wind. He could sing, I guarantee to this day, he could sing every word of that CD. We listened to it a lot of times. I think it's one of those I got for a birthday, and you only have 4 CDs, we might as well listen to it. Smashing Pumpkins gets old. So, no, that was fun. He and I had a lot of good times. Brock had an amazing memory. One that couldn't compete with anyone else except maybe Dan. The recollection of facts and trivia was beyond anyone else I knew. Growing up, you'd think that you want to watch movies about action shows or sports cars or stuff. Brock would watch the Weather Channel. He would sit there and watch the Weather Channel for hours, and we had to battle over the rest of us kids wanting to watch something else. And Brock's sitting there watching the Weather Channel, like watching trends across the country. What's going to be the weather here, and low pressure systems over here. He wanted to be a meteorologist for a long time. And he could just recall the facts of storm systems that happened last year, and it was really fun. I didn't enjoy it at the time because he was hogging the remote and watching Weather Channel as a teenager, but spent a lot of years on the road with Brock working. Clinton and I never overlapped paths with Brock very much, but man, we had a lot of fun. Our work was never dull. It would be always a competition and always trying to innovate something new. If we hung this many panels of net one day, the next day was how can we hang more? Or it was, all right, you take these guys over on this side of the driving range. I'll take these guys over and see who can finish first. You know, it was always a battle. He always won.
He was always more risky than me. Fun story with Daniel Swain and Brad. I come out of the house one day and they have a Ford Taurus, I think it was, pulled up on milk crates. So it's a front wheel drive vehicle. They cut off the sides of the milk crates and drove the back tires up onto milk crates, so that when you're driving, you have no traction now and could skid around corners. It's just crazy. Skating, a lot of time down on skates. We never picked up a skateboard. It was always rollerblades and the baggy pants. He was an amazing wrestler all through school. I never tried once because I knew I would lose. But man, he was a good wrestler. We had a scary experience together one time. So as you know, working with Dan is very particular about things. If you got to the gas station and you were sitting in the truck, you were getting in trouble. You pull up to the gas station, you get out, wash the windows, check the oil, check the tire pressure. And so that was ingrained in Brock and I. And so we were driving the original first little pickup we had, a little Ford Ranger stick shift. And we had stopped at a gas station and we did just that. Jumped out and checked the oil. Well, we didn't latch the hood down very well. We jumped on the freeway and I was driving and we get up to about speed and the hood just went bam right up onto the windshield. We both rolled down our windows really fast and pulled over and made it through, and somehow Brock helped. We wired it shut and that truck hood never shut properly again. To piggyback off what Patrick and Clint said about things that Brock couldn't do, very few things. I agree with them about the beard. Second was he couldn't sing. He would do it a lot, but he wasn't very good at it. No, Brock was a great big brother. We had a lot of fun experiences together, and we never fought once, physically or mentally. He's a great brother. We'll miss him dearly, and I know he would appreciate all you being here. So, love you, man. See you soon. Can't wait to see you again. I'll see you soon. Can't wait to see you again. Whew.
She's making me do this with her. I'm Jenny and this is Jessie. We're the oldest of the sisters. I actually hate to be called Jenny, but Brock called me Jenny all the time, so we'll go with that. Brock made such a huge mark in his 40 years on Earth. He was extremely smart, kind-hearted, and authentic. Brock was always his truest self. He never met a stranger, and he would talk to anyone who crossed his path. He loved to educate people, and he could literally talk about anything and everything. He was passionate about politics, sports, music, economics, religion, cryptocurrency, history, and more recently, genealogy. He loved spicy food, and Indian was his favorite food. I'm so happy that I got to spend a day with Brock a couple months ago in May. We drove up to Flagstaff together to surprise my husband after a race. And Brock absolutely loved animals. He doted on his rescue pup, Chloe. That day, we couldn't hit the road until he had completely set up the back seat with the dog bed all level with the console so Chloe could see out the front window and be a part of the road trip. Chloe was his everything, and he was an awesome pet parent. Brock really wanted to be a father, and I'm so glad that he got the opportunity to be a dog dad. He was the best brother. He put up with a lot from so many sisters. When we were little kids, he was always first to be zipped into a suitcase and sent flying down the stairs. He was the first to be pushed down the steepest hill in a little red wagon, and he was such a good sport about it. He was so tough and so brave. Brock, you were one of a kind, and you'll be greatly missed. I love you.
So I'm Jessie. Jen and I are the very oldest of the 11 children. We have a yours, mine, and theirs type of family blend. I was married before Abby was born, so there's quite a big age difference. And I have a lot of memories that are from when we were little, and a lot of memories as an adult with him. Brock's 3 years younger than me and Jen, and he's 3 years older than Rachel and Sarah. He was sandwiched in between two sets of twins, girls. He was always told what to do, and he handled it really well. He was very patient with us. Brock was always a special presence in a big, large family. We like to joke that he was like the celebrity of the family. He just was an exceptional family member. He loved his siblings, and he loved gaining nieces and nephews. He loved holding all the new babies. One of my most favorite pictures, I was talking with Heidi about this, is that one of him holding baby Elliot, tiny, probably like days old, and he's wearing his black Defend Death Metal hat. Just some quick little memories that I wanted to share that I was thinking of. When I was in high school, Brock came up to visit me in Salt Lake, and we went skiing. He had never skied before, and I told him he was going skiing with us. And so we were going up the lift, and I happened to drop a glove 30 feet down to the bottom or the middle of a triple black diamond run. And I looked at him and said, "You're going to get that." And he did. And I remember saying, "I'll meet you at the bottom." He still beat me. He could do it. He was so strong, and there was just no question. He could do so many things. But that's a special memory I have with him. As soon as Kyle and I got married, we moved to the Bay Area, and then 2 years later, Brock graduated high school and moved to the Bay Area and moved in with us. That's when he was working with my dad. I have no idea how I did this, but I talked him into getting a job with me at Abercrombie. It did not last long. I think we worked maybe 2 shifts, but it was just, he did it. I said, "You got to do this with me." He's like, "Okay." I like to consider myself as one of the original Judge Netting employees. I didn't get paid, but I ran errands because they had a lot of work in the Bay Area. And so I remember Tomato Face very well. And I remember working with Brock and all of the trouble that you guys got into and all the good hard work that you guys did. But I enjoyed, and I have fond memories looking back and loving having spent so many days with you guys out there. I remember hog ringing once, where you take the bottom of the net and you have to like take these hog rings and with the pliers, and you have to squeeze them really tight to the bottom wire to secure it to the very bottom. And so we would just do that, and he'd talk to me, and we'd just meet, and we came up with a saying together: "Make it tight, make it right." So we always, like, every time we had a conversation on the phone, however we would figure, like, I would slip that in, I would just be like, "Make it tight, make it right." And he did. He certainly always made it right, and he made things fun. His favorite color is black. My favorite color is black. It made sense. That's why we're all wearing black for him. If you look into his closet, you would see 100 t-shirts, and every single one of them were black. that's pretty much all he wore was black t-shirts. I remember I have teenagers of my own now, and I would have conversations with him, and you could talk to him about anything. I admired him so much and his intelligence and his life experience and the love that he had for people. And I remember complaining about teenage daughters. And one time he said, just love them. That's all you need to do is you just love them. I had a lifetime of memories with him. But that was Brock. He was so strong and he was so smart and he was so kind and he was so generous with everything that he had. He never stopped moving or thinking or doing things for others. He grew out his hair so he could donate it to Locks of Love. He helped people stranded on the side of the road. He fed the homeless. He offered his unlimited wealth of knowledge with anybody who was willing to listen. He came to visit and hold every single newborn baby that was born in our family. He just loved people. Just like Mother Teresa said, Brock exemplified in character that when you love someone, you have no time to judge them. And it showed every day in his interactions with those who were lucky enough to share space with him. I'll end with Connor Oberst from Bright Eyes. He said, but compared to your eyes, nothing shines quite as bright. Brock had a twinkle in his eye. He shined a light for people when it was dark, and he had a quick wit and an easy laugh. And never failed to put a smile on your face. He was just simply an exceptional human being. I love you forever, Brock. I'll look forward to seeing you again.
Everybody said such beautiful things about Brock. We could all go on forever. I mean, we haven't even touched the surface, I think. And thank you all for being here. It's like crazy to be back. We grew up here, and the judges are still in the first 2 rows. I was like, this view is so familiar. And the reason we were in the first 2 rows is because we were always late, and those were the only 2 rows open. So all of us, 9 most of the time, had to embarrassingly walk to the front during sacrament meeting late. And my parents, I think, never got used to it. There was no more ice cream on Sundays. We were always late. It's such a treat to see everybody and all the people who had such a huge impact on our lives. All of Brock's most recent friends are here, and so good to see them. And thank you guys for loving Brock as much as we've all loved him. We came back for his 40th birthday just last November. And just the amount of people that showed up for him was just incredible. And we're like, he's still doing it. He's still making friends everywhere he goes. He's the mayor of every block. I think my favorite role of all the roles that Brock played was his brother role, and he took it really seriously. He's a dear friend and to everybody, but he was the best big brother. Kurt, you're great too, in different ways. And I always argued with Brock, by the way. We fought all the time. He's just really protective, and being his little sister came with a lot of royalties. Oh, you're Brock's little sister. I was suddenly cool. I actually had a teacher, Dr. Glockhammer, was like, oh, you're Brock's little sister. Okay, then I did whatever I wanted. I got out of detention all the time. I would just go to Dr. Glockhammer and she would cross off whatever things that I needed got me in detention just for being Brock's little sister. He was good at everything he did. I think we've definitely shared that with you guys. He was always super cool, but never too cool for anybody or anything or anyone. He had so many friends, but he never missed that one person that needed a little extra, that needed a little love and attention. He would spot them immediately and do whatever he could to be there for them or help them in whatever way he could. My favorite years with Brock, I have so many fun memories, but when we first were graduated high school and young, and my parents had moved to Costa Mesa, we were like, we're going to be on our own. We got a little apartment together and like 15 minutes away, and we just go to shows together, and we didn't miss any of them. We'd go to LA, we'd go to Pomona, we'd go to San Diego. We didn't miss a single show. And he was a vegetarian. It's interesting because he's like this muscle man. If you look at him, you'd think he lifted weights every day, and he actually didn't. He just is like that and didn't eat meat for as long as I can remember. Because he cares about animals, and when he explained, he's like, how could you eat something that was alive like that? And it's just like, he's such a sensitive, loving person, and so disciplined, and whatever he believed in, he stuck with it 100%. Brock didn't do anything halfway. He didn't do anything just slightly. Just everything was all out. So he has this beautiful dog that he loves so dearly, and he sent one of his last text messages to me was, "Chloe gets everything in my will." Okay. So she's his royalty. And Heidi, one of our little Heidi's the second to youngest in our family. And we live next door to each other in San Francisco. And I was like, I want to get a dog. She's like, no, we're not getting a dog. Please don't get a dog because I'm just going to have to babysit it for you. And I was like, ugh. She really, really didn't want me to get a dog. And the first thing she said this week was like, so what do you think about taking Chloe? And I was like, really? And now she's obsessed with it. She can't wait. She's really excited. And I'm excited for Chloe to come be in San Francisco. Brock really loves San Francisco. My favorite memories were with him there. He introduced me to that city, and he loved it. And can't wait for Chloe to spend some time up in the Bay. A lot of you guys know our birth mother passed away 2 years ago now, and I was pretty devastated, and we were all just, very lost. And I remember Brock just showing up and just taking care of business. He just got up there, and we were all kind of falling apart, and he just made sure everything was taken care of. And I just always leaned on Brock in that way. Every time I called him, what do you need? What can I do? He just wanted to be there for me in any way he could. If I had a problem, he was like all over it, trying to fix it. He was just on it. And so it was always nice to have a big brother like that was always gonna have your back in every way. One of my last times with Brock, I spent the weekend at his house, and we got in an argument, something science related, and I was like, I'm gonna show him how grown up I am, and I got this. And no, I did not have it. He did win. And I remember we were still arguing. Like, we went to bed and we were still arguing. I was sleeping on the couch, and he yells from his room. He's like, I'm right, and I love you. And Brock, you're right. You're always right. And I'd give anything to duke it out with you again. when we were growing up, Brock, Rachel, and I, until our sweet Janny came along, things were kind of rough. We love you so much, Mom, for raising us. But Brock and Rachel had this little, Rachel's my twin, but Brock and Rachel had like a secret language together. They just understood each other. And they were always off doing all the cool things. And I was always too scared or too much of a wimp. And they were always like the little adventurers. They weren't scared of anything. And they were really close. And when she passed, Brock was devastated. We used to spend a ton of time at the beach. When we moved to Arizona, we'd still go back in the summers and be at the beach. And I just remember playing in the sand, and Brock and Rachel would go out into the waves, and they always went too far. I would stress out so hard. I would be in the sand. I'd make sure my mom was watching. I'd make sure the lifeguard was watching, and I would just be like, just watching them. I think I sent the lifeguard out for them a couple times, which Rachel loved it. Brock was a little embarrassed, but Rachel loved it. But they always were just off on their own. And I couldn't sleep. We were back in Costa Mesa with the family, and he lived on 30th Street over down in Newport for a long time. And I went to the beach, and I was up early enough to watch all the surfers out, and I sat there in the sand, and his little spot where he used to live right there on the beach. And I realized that Brock and Rachel are still out there in the waves, doing their thing, not afraid. And I'm here in the sand, and I'll be in the sand, and that's okay. Because I know that that's what they're doing. And Brock, I love you so much. The impression you've left on everyone here and the role you've played in my life is so special, and we love you. Actually, Abby, I was gonna just say, Abby's the baby of the family. I didn't want to forget this little piece. Abby and Brock had a very, very special relationship. I think Abby, we all know, if you guys know our family, Abby's the princess. She's the baby, and I don't know how she learned how to walk, so we carried her everywhere. That girl did not get set down. But Brock and her had this really, really, really precious relationship. They were calling each other every Thursdays at 10. He took her to all the USC games. Never mind that I was a Bruin. Decked her out in all the USC gear, and took her surfing. And that's just the kind of brother he was. But thank you all for being here, and we love you, Brock.
Everybody I keep like crossing things off my list that I was going to talk about. Like, everybody's just covering so much. There's so many great memories with Brock. I think one of the things that Brock was so good at was making you feel special. The person that was in front of him feel so special, and like he would just stare into your soul like you were the only person in the room. Anyone he ever talked to he had this magic about him. Like, everybody felt like they were his best friend. And I have so many great memories with Brock. He always just made me feel like I was important, and that what I wanted to do was exciting. And one of my first memories with him was he taught me how to ride a bike. And I don't think I ever, I don't know. I think I never did training wheels. He was like, no, you got it. you're gonna do it. Just let's do it. Let's learn it today. And that was how he was. He just said, like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do it full on. I remember in high school and middle school, he would pick me up in his maroon Chevy Silverado. It was purple, this truck, and he loved it. We'd listen to Bright Eyes and all his favorite bands, and he would leave the stereo on too loud, and then when mom would get in the car and turn it on, it would be blasting, and dang it, Brock. He loved music so much. It was such a big part of his life. I was able to drive that truck all through high school. And growing up in Newport Beach, everyone drove Mercedes and BMWs, and I drove this really, really loud lowered truck with huge rims and big snarling grill, and I loved it. It was so Brock, and I loved having that piece of him. And I remember he would take us to surf, and he was so good at it. I remember one time he fell off his board and he sliced his hand on the fin, and he came in and he was just bleeding. He was always bleeding from something. He was always injured. He'd always come inside and blood dripping down his arm, and he'd get so excited, take a picture. And I remember when he cut his hand when he was surfing, I was so concerned that he was like, I'm gonna go back out. And I was like, no, a shark's gonna get you. He was like, it's fine. Just like that. I was like, no, we gotta get back at it. I'm here to surf. And he really, really did love animals. He had always had such a special relationship with any animal that he had. I remember one time when we lived in Costa Mesa, he found this bird, and it was a parakeet or some little bird, and he named it Sparky, and it would sit on his shoulder all day and it wouldn't fly away. He had it for a few months, I think. And they would go to bed, and he would just lay there, and it would sleep on his chest right here. And he would just walk over to the house with the bird. And I don't know how we got this bird, but it was his pet, and he loved it so much. He just always had such a special relationship with animals. And I remember a couple years ago, my husband Austin and I took a road trip through Arizona, and we stayed the night with Brock and our dog Zoe, and then Brock has Chloe, and Chloe was very protective of Brock. She would sit in every room he was in. She would sit at the doorway and just growl and she was so protective over him. I remember Brock just insisted that we take his bed. He was just like that. You're at my house. Like, no, take my bed. It's fine. I'll sleep on the couch. It was just always just wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable and taken care of. And he would drop everything to pick you up from the airport. I am a flight attendant, and my sister Heidi was too. And one time we were on call, and we both got called on a trip to Phoenix, and we called him, and when we landed, we're like, hey, we're here, we have 3 hours. He's like, okay, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and just would pick you up and take you to lunch and make you feel special, and would drop everything to be with you. And he just loved his family so much and spending time with us. And anytime you called, when are you gonna come visit? Okay, Brock, when are you gonna come visit? He just loved spending time with him. The most recent memory was his 40th birthday last November. We had a big family celebration, and Brock insisted having it at his house, and I'm like, okay, great. And so many people showed up. So many of you here showed up, and so many of his neighbors in his community that he had built. And it was so special to see this family of people, this group of people that all loved him and talked about him so highly. Brock never bragged. We didn't know. We had no idea. It was just all these people came and just wanted to be around him and feel his energy, and he just was so loved. And I realized yesterday that I will never be able to hug him again, and it wrecked me. And Brock just gave the best hugs, and I'm so grateful for the presence he had in my life as my big brother. And he's very missed. And thank you.
What an amazing and full life Brock lived. He was absolutely a great brother, great friend, and great uncle. I know I can echo many of the same sentiments that have been mentioned today to mine and Vanessa's kids. He was such a great uncle and stayed connected with them and gave them gifts and loved them, and they loved him so much. And so many more stories we could tell of Brock. We're now going to have a piano solo by Brock's nephew, Garrett King. This is an arrangement inspired by Brock and his love for music. Following that piano solo, we'll have closing remarks by Brock's father, Dan Judge. We'll have a closing song, hymn number 308, Love One Another, followed by a closing prayer by Heidi Judge. After the services, the family will be staying here in the cultural hall to have some food and to mingle with anybody that can stay around. You're all welcome to stay and invited. Thank you.
Could have closed the meeting with that, Garrett. Thank you. That was beautiful. Dear brothers and sisters, friends, family, and some of you I may not know, thank you very, very much for being here. This has been a lengthy meeting. Brock and I used to joke that funerals and weddings were the ruination of many good beach days. So that's why we held it here in Arizona. No, I'm just kidding on that, but we did occasionally make irreverent comments that way. We thank you. We thank those who have prepared things here. Words of condolence that people that I don't know and I may not know here on this earth. We've been through this with one of our other children, but I will tell you the beautiful part of the passing of a loved one. The temporary separation is the wonderful outpouring of love that you feel from others. And we're so grateful for that. This meeting has been long. I will move along quickly. Forgive me for this. So much to say about Brock in so little time. We're sorry we couldn't have all of you on the program. I know every one of you would have had great things to say. Brock was born November 24th, 1981. He was delivered C-section, and I can't remember the reasons, but there was some sort of complication, and we think it was his broad shoulders pressing against his umbilical cord. But anyway, they went ahead and delivered him the easy way. He had broad shoulders from the very beginning. He always stood out with his physique. Was always something to behold. Even when he didn't work out, he was all muscle. And that strong jaw. And a handsome young man. I don't have to tell you that. Brock was sealed to me and his mother in January of 1982. He was about 2 months old. Remember when they brought him into the Salt Lake Temple, he was in a little pair of white shorts and a white shirt, and we could hear him fussing out in the hall. As those of you who have been to the temple know it's a very reverent place, but Brock was fussing. So it should be no surprise to us for that, but we could hear him fussing. And then when he came in and they performed the sealing ceremony, he settled right down. Brock was a stinker in church. I felt like I was inactive. For those of you who aren't members, that's what we generally refer to people who don't go to church all the time as inactive or temporarily deluded. How's that for? But he was a stinker. You could not keep him sitting down in the building for anything in the chapel. So I remember feeling like I was inactive by the time he was ready to go to nursery. And we had moved one time when he was about 17 months, and we actually lied to the nursery leader that he was 18 months, which was the age to go in. But sure enough, he just turned around. He raised a big stink, and they had to bring him back to us. And even when he was 18 months, he raised a stink in there. It usually ended up with me anyway. But what a kid. Brock and I were inseparable when we were younger, when he was a little boy. Back in the day when I built power lines for a living, weren't quite so many attorneys in the world. No apologies to Clint Finch for that. I would take him out on the job with me, and he was just enamored by the equipment. You know, I think at the time the biggest Caterpillar tractor made was a D11, and Brock would always say, "I just saw a D14, Dad." Everything was bigger than life to Brock. One day out on the job, we were stringing wire across a highway down in San Diego, and this particular, you guys may think I'm crazy after I say this, but this particular line, the highway was about 250 feet wide. It was 4 lanes, if I remember correctly. And there were the power lines on top, and I won't tell you what we call phone linemen, but anyway, and then usually cable TV and telephone lines, and there were several pairs, what we call pairs of lines. So basically it was about 4 feet, and each of the lines were spaced about a foot. And I asked Brock, I said, "We've got to drive around to the other side and get ready to pull this wire. Do you want to walk across that highway?" And he looked at me, "How do I do that, Dad?" You know, I think he was about 5 or 6, and I I said, well, you just grab a hold of the top one and you put your feet on the bottom one and you just walk side by side across that highway. And he said, I'll do it, Dad, and he did it. I would probably still be in prison now had he fallen onto the highway, but that was Brock. Yeah. No limitations. He spent a great deal of time with my deceased father, Grandpa Jimmy. My dad adored that boy. He had a little bike seat on the back of his bike, and he'd strap him in. He was a little more concerned about his safety than his dad was, but he'd strap him in the chair, and they'd go wherever Brock wanted, but it was usually the donut shop. And he'd take him down for a donut, and then they'd ride around on their bikes. So you'd see they were kind of a fixture in the community wherever they were, because my dad would just ride for miles and miles with Brock happily on the back. It's been mentioned Brock had a quest for knowledge. I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and I was just talking. He said, Dad, you need to listen to this video, but he proceeded to tell me what was on this video. Brothers and sisters, I'm not exaggerating. It was about a 20-minute video about autonomy or something like that. And he told me about it, and then he sent it to me, and I listened to it, and I'm not kidding, word per word. He had the whole thing memorized. I am not kidding. He had the most incredible mind. As mentioned, he used to watch the Weather Channel ad nauseum. He could explain to you why the marine layer was the way it was, how tornadoes are formed, and the difference between a typhoon and a hurricane. He was incredible. When those of the older people here in the audience, when he was just a little boy, honest to goodness, maybe 4 or 5 years old, we nicknamed him the Shell Answer Man. And for those of you who are younger, Shell Oil Company used to have commercials about the petroleum industry. That's something we used to have before our current presidency, but I digress. But the petroleum industry, and Brock would just answer a question, and this is before Google. He'd bust out the encyclopedias or whatever it took to get the answer if he didn't have it right away. And it was pretty rare he made something up. He usually had the answer spot on. Brock was a big-time USC fan. He had the privilege of working on campus a couple of times in our company, and he was just awestruck. But everybody at USC just loved him, facilities people and such. I still get asked, how's Brock? It'll be a difficult question to answer now, but he loved USC football. He played football for a brief time at Mountain View. He wrestled, as has been mentioned. He used to like to work out. He told me one time he wore his headphones, and I said, what do you listen to? He said, I'm not listening to anything. I just put those on so people don't keep me from working out. He didn't want to be bothered. But, oh, what a guy. We worked together for about 15 years at Judge Netting. I always said Brock didn't like minutia. He loathed bureaucrats and things that were bureaucratic and people that were kind of hell-bent in getting in his way of getting the job done. But I always said if I could lay out 10,000 poles from here to Alaska, Brock could get to work on it. He'd be done in 3 months. And he would just rig them in rhythm and repetition over and over again. But if it was something that was somebody was caught up in the minutia or somebody trying to keep him from doing it, it was very, very frustrating for him. I'm sure some of you have experienced that firsthand. He learned how to climb poles. He just borrowed my hooks and up he'd go. I think there's a picture out here. If you look real close, he Brock up on a pole. No limitations. As has been mentioned, Brock loved the underdog. I remember frequently we were at Harding Park in San Francisco, and we had a temp on the job. And if you know anything about temps, they don't tend to be the cream of the human crop, but they get paid daily, and there's a reason for that. But Brock was Brock was more concerned about this temp, and he had only known him one day. He was more concerned about that temp and how he was going to get home, because I think the last bus was leaving or something like that. And the guy didn't have a time to get back. And Brock took him and got his check cashed, took him to Labor Ready where they get paid daily, and then took him to wherever his home was. I shudder to think what that temp used the money for, but he always looking after the underdog. He met Daniel Swain early, and I'm not sure when. How far along were you, Daniel? 5th grade. Daniel's upbringing wasn't easy, but Brock had a very, very special spot in his heart. Brock was his brother. Cody Gulch. Brock looked after him. As you've heard, he fed the homeless. He called it metal and a meal. Brock loved heavy metal. Very heavy metal music. I don't know if there's a word to describe, but Patrick, who spoke to us earlier, I'm going to briefly. I've got texts out of the woodwork here for people that I don't know, but this young man's name, we met. You don't know me, but we met a little while back when you came into town. I just want to share with you that your son meant a tremendous amount to me and many others. We connected at the soul level like no one else. He brought together many people that would have never met if it wasn't for him. He is the action to my thought, and we shared many of the same feelings. He will always be an inspiration to me. I think that sums up the feelings of so many. I hope I get to meet all of you at some point. Brock passed away peacefully in his sleep on September 6th. They found him on his bed. So far as we know, there was no foul play, but a coroner's report is forthcoming. I am glad from all appearances that he didn't suffer. Grateful to report that. My family's wondering if I'm going to preach to them. This is a church meeting, and I'm going to just a bit. Please bear with me. I'm borrowing heavily from a talk called The Doors of Death by our prophet Russell M. Nelson, delivered in 1992 when he was in his Quorum of the 12. Death separates the spirit and the body, which are the soul of man. It's from the Doctrine and Covenants. I think this is healing, advice, and counsel. Mourning is one of the deepest expressions of pure love. It is a natural response in complete accord with divine commandment. In the Doctrine and Covenants, it says, "Thou shalt live together in love, and so much that thou shalt weep for the loss of them that die." Conversely, we cannot appreciate our reunion with our loved ones without the mourning that we're experiencing now. I love this saying, the only way to take sorrow out of death is to take the love out of life. Brock, we loved you. Yeah, we do love you. Eternal perspective provides peace which passeth all understanding. We don't understand this at this time. One day we will. I was talking with Brock just a couple of weeks ago. He had a way of marrying the temporal with the spiritual. And although he wasn't active in church per se, he was a very deeply spiritual young man. And I was lamenting the state of affairs in our country right now. And I wasn't seeking counsel or solace from Brock, but I talking about the craziness of the world and even some of our family that may be a little bit misdirected right now. And he said, "Dad, we knew about this battle in the preexistence. We agreed to come here, and we know how it's going to end. Be of good cheer." I was so appreciative of Brock for those words of solace. And he's right. It is our plan of happiness from our Heavenly Father And it was not expedient that man should be reclaimed from this temporal death, for that would deny the great plan of happiness. So our death is part of the plan of happiness, life and our death. And although we're not enjoying that part right now, someday we will. We will be reunited with Brock. I know he's in paradise. Paradise is a state where the righteous go to dwell with their Heavenly Father, waiting the judgment. In Alma, we read, the spirits of those who are righteous are received into a state of happiness, which is called paradise, a state of rest, a state of peace. I know that Brock is there and that he is with us today. In conclusion, this life is a time to prepare. I've had very intense feelings of late as Brock and I have been reunited. That this is a time to meet God. Brock's been talking about spiritual things lately to a great deal. I'm not sure if he had a premonition or what it was, but we were definitely hearing a great deal of spiritual things. This is the time to meet God. President Nelson says, unfinished business is our worst business. Perpetual procrastination must yield to perceptive preparation. Today, we have a little more time to bless others, time to be kinder, more compassionate, quicker to thank and slower to scold, more generous in sharing, more gracious in caring. And I believe Brock lived that, especially of late, as he's reunited with his family. Harriet Beecher Stowe, quoting her, I love this quote, the bitterest tears shed around graves are for words with unsaid and for deeds left undone. I want to illustrate, as I conclude, a few things from Brock's remaining time here, recent time. In November, Janie, to her eternal credit, maybe back in October, called Brock and said, we want to have a 40th birthday party for you. Son, we'll do it in Arizona, and we'll get as much of the family together as we can. You know, that's an accomplishment in itself. And she rented a house, and she got arranged flights for everybody. And she said, Brock, you know your dad's going to be there. And I believe he reluctantly agreed. And so we all gathered here. The last minute, Brock said, I want to have it at my house. And Jenny, being the planner that she was, reluctantly agreed. We went over and got his house prepared. What a beautiful, enlightening experience that was. Brock had an open house and an open heart. And as we saw his friends come and go, you could feel the love. It was just incredible. Many of you are here. And it was absolutely incredible. The love that everybody had for Brock. And at the end of the evening, Brock gave me a hug. The next day, he bought us dinner. And then he and Sarah drove me to the airport. I had to leave early. And Brock expressed some feelings to me from his heart about how he felt about the 10 years that we'd been apart. And I told him, son, in 2022, I will make this right. Whatever it takes. I promise you I'll make it right. And I gave him a hug and said goodbye. I received some texts back and forth with him, wished him a Merry Christmas, and he was acknowledging that I was there, and we started to communicate. And about February, this has been mentioned before, I had this nagging in the back of my head, this is something I've got to do. I talked with Janet, and I said, are you prepared to do whatever it takes? That was temporarily, spiritually, or whatever, to reconcile with Brock. And she, my beloved wife, said yes. Right about that time, I got a package in the mail. Most of you can't see this, but this is a Gerber knife. I'm going to give you the backstory real quickly. When Brock was about 4, we had an avocado grove in Temecula, and Brock would work with me. Maybe 5. No, he was a little older than that. I'm sorry, 6 or 7 years old. But Brock would get in his little bib overalls, and he and I would go work in the grove, and whatever it was, or trimming trees, or fixing water lines, or just picking avocados, and working with Mauricio, trying to understand Spanish. He was always by my side. And I was up in a tree, and Brock walked up to me, and he had this, he was just crestfallen. His tears were pouring out of his eyes. And Brock, when he was younger, he had these big, beautiful eyes. He finally grew into those, but when he was young, they were so big. And the tears were just pouring down his face. I had a knife at the time that was very, very, it was kind of new. It was graphite, and it was kind of the hottest thing, and little boys love knives. But Brock was particularly enamored with this graphite knife, and it was cool, and he'd open it, close it, and cut anything he could, including himself with it. He came up to me and he said, "Dad, I've lost my knife, that knife. I've lost your knife." And the tears were just pouring down his face. Now, if you know anything about avocados, there's usually about this much high in leaves, in a grove. So we had almost 10 acres of them, and the chances of finding that knife was nil to none. I'm sure it's still there. But I think Brock expected a spanking, but that's something we used to do back in the days of the oil industry. But the tears were pouring down his face. And I remember to this day, it was kind of a sacred moment. And he felt so sad. And I just gave him a hug, and I said, "Brock, I could buy another knife. Don't worry," he said. "I know you didn't mean to lose it." And he just sobbed, and he held me. So fast forward to February of this year, I got this box in the mail from Brock. I don't know if you could see this. There was a note attached. "I've been on a journey the past 18 months, reconciling things left undone. Consider this a symbolic memento for 40 plus years of living. This is as close a replica as I can recall. The original likely still in the grove. And inside was this Gerber knife." Brothers and sisters, thank you for being here. I want to bear witness to you that Jesus Christ lives. After that, I sat there and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed at my desk over that sweet act of my son. About a week and a half later, I told Janny I've got to get over and see Brock. He picked me up at the airport. We were going to get something to eat, but he pulled into his driveway for some reason. Probably Chloe needed something. And I started to say, "Brock, please forgive me." Oh, and he reached over and hugged me, and he said, "Dad, nothing more needs to be said. You're forgiven. And I love you." Forgiveness is a miracle. It's required of all of us. And if I could leave one message with you this day, please, if you have anything undone, any harsh words, whenever you say goodbye to a friend or a loved one, make sure your last words are kind and gentle and loving, and find it in your heart to forgive. And I leave this message with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Father, we're grateful that we could all be together today. Thank you so much for bringing us all here to celebrate Brock. We're thankful for him and all that he did to touch all of our lives. Please help us that we will be kind to one another and that we will forgive and love each other. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
That concludes our services. Again, we'll be meeting in the cultural hall directly behind these doors, and everybody's welcome to stay that can.